When we talk about the fall of empires, we usually picture grand battles, dramatic betrayals, and climactic final stands. But what if an empire rotted from the inside out, cannibalizing itself until nothing was left? Today we're doing a tactical autopsy on one of science fiction's most iconic galactic tyrannies, the Gold Empire. We'll dissect how the death of a single leader, Ra, triggered a domino effect that plunged the galaxy into chaos and ultimately led to the Empire's self-destructs. This wasn't just a war, it was a systemic collapse, and Earth, surprisingly, was the catalyst. Let's set the scene. For 10,000 years, the Gold System Lords ruled the Milky Way with an iron fist. They were parasites posing as gods, using stolen technology and legions of slave armies, the Jaffa, to maintain their dominion. At the very top of this brutal hierarchy was the Supreme System Lord Ra. He wasn't just the most powerful, he was the glue holding the entire fragile system together. The other System Lords, ambitious and treacherous as they were, all operated under his shadow. They schemed, they fought minor skirmishes, but they never dared to make a move that would fundamentally destabilize the Empire. Ra's authority, backed by his immense fleet and personal power, was the ultimate deterrent. Then, in 1994, a small team from a planet the Gold had long forgotten, Earth, managed to do the impossible. Using a nuclear device, Colonel Jack O'Neill and Dr. Daniel Jackson killed Ra aboard his mothership. From the Gold perspective, this was unthinkable. A primitive world, a bunch of Tory, had decapitated their empire. The news sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The symbol of ultimate power was gone, and in his place, a massive power vacuum opened up. It was like pulling the kingpin from a stack of grenades. Every System Lord who had ever dreamed of sitting on Ra's throne suddenly saw their chance. This is where the Gold Civil War truly begins. It wasn't a declared war with clear factions and front lines. Instead, it was a chaotic, galaxy-spanning free-for-all. The immediate aftermath of Ra's death saw his territories and resources become the ultimate prize. His domains were vast, his armies loyal only through fear, and his technology the most advanced. System Lords like Apophis, Cronus, and Baal immediately began scrambling to absorb Ra's assets. This initial phase was pure opportunism. Fleets clashed over key planets. Jaffa armies that once served Ra were either destroyed or forcibly conscripted, and entire populations were caught in the crossfire. Apophis, in particular, made a bold and aggressive play, quickly rising to become the most prominent contender for the throne. His raids on Earth and Abydos weren't just about revenge, they were a declaration of his intent to succeed Ra. But this brings us to the fundamental flaw in the Gold system. Their entire economy was based on warlordism. A Gold's power wasn't measured in trade, industry, or innovation. It was measured by the number of ships in their fleet, the size of their Jaffa army, and the amount of territory they controlled. They didn't build, they conquered. They didn't create, they stole. Their entire infrastructure was designed for oppression and resource extraction, not sustainable growth. This meant that the only way for a System Lord to become more powerful was to take from another. When Ra was alive, he kept his predatory instinct in check. Without him, it became the only rule. The Civil War accelerated this self-destructive cycle. To fight their rivals, System Lords needed more ships and more Jaffa. To get more ships, they needed more Naquata and other resources. To get those resources, they had to conquer more planets, which required more ships and Jaffa. It was a vicious feedback loop. They would strip mine worlds, enslave populations, and throw armies at each other, all while their collective industrial base stagnated or even degraded. They were so focused on fighting each other that they neglected the very foundation of their power. You can't run a galactic empire when your primary economic activity is blowing up your neighbor's factories. Now let's talk about the chaos agent in this whole equation, Earth. The Stargate Command, or SGC, didn't have a fleet of motherships or millions of soldiers. What they had was a Stargate, a handful of highly effective teams, and a knack for being in the wrong place at the right time. Or, from the Gold perspective, the perfectly wrong place at the perfectly wrong time. Her strategy, consciously or not, was one of asymmetric warfare. They couldn't win a direct fight, so they poked a hornet's nest. SG-1's missions were the galactic equivalent of guerrilla tactics. They assassinated minor Gold, destroyed key facilities like shipyards and power sources, and most importantly, they sowed dissent. The greatest weapon Earth deployed wasn't a bomb or a Zadigan, it was an idea. The idea that the Gold were not gods. Every time SG-1 defeated a Gold, every time Daniel Jackson revealed the truth to a group of enslaved humans, and every time Teal'c stood as a free Jaffa, they chipped away at the divine authority the System Lords had spent millennia building. This sparked rebellions across the galaxy. The Free Jaffa movement, which began with Teal'c's defection, was a direct existential threat to the Gold power structure. The Jaffa were the Gold's army, their enforcers, and their incubators. A widespread Jaffa rebellion wasn't just a military problem. It was a biological and logistical nightmare. The SGC actively supported this rebellion, providing intelligence, weapons, and a safe haven, turning a spark of defiance into a raging fire. So you have this perfect storm. The System Lords are busy tearing each other apart over Ra's scraps. The warlord economy is forcing them to deplete their own resources in an endless war of attrition. And while they're distracted, a small, pesky team from Earth is running round, breaking their toys and telling their soldiers that their gods are liars. The System Lords were constantly forced to divert resources to deal with SG-1 or to put down rebellions inspired by them. A fleet that was supposed to be attacking Apophis might suddenly have to be sent to crush an uprising on a mining world that SG-1 visited 2 weeks earlier. This constant disruption prevented any single System Lord from gaining a decisive advantage. No one could consolidate power because Earth and its allies were always there to tip the scales. The war escalated even further with the introduction of new players. The Replicators, drawn to the Asgard galaxy, forced the Asgard to divert their attention, meaning they could no longer keep the System Lords in check as they had done in the past. Then came Anubis, an ascended being, cast out and possessing knowledge no other Gold had. He represented a true existential threat. He wasn't just another warlord. He was a force of nature with superior technology and a single-minded goal of galactic domination. His rival forced the remaining, weakened System Lords, led by Baal, into a temporary and highly unstable alliance. They had to stop fighting each other just to survive against him. This was the final phase of the Empire's collapse. The long, grinding civil war had bled them dry. Their fleets were depleted, their best Jaffa had died fighting each other or had joined a rebellion, and their industrial capacity was a shadow of its former self. They were so weakened that they couldn't stand against Anubis alone, and they certainly couldn't stop the combined threat of Anubis, the Replicators, and the ever-present meddling of the Tory. The discovery of the ancient superweapon in Antarctica and its use by Jack O'Neill to annihilate Anubis's fleet over Earth was the final nail in the coffin. The most powerful Gold to emerge from the Civil War was utterly destroyed. With Anubis gone, the Empire was a hollow shell. The remaining System Lords, led by a fragmented Baal, had no real power left. The Jaffa Rebellion had reached critical mass and finally succeeded in achieving freedom. The Gold lost their armies, their slaves, and their legitimacy all at once. The Empire didn't fall in a single, glorious battle. It collapsed under the weight of its own flawed design, relentlessly pushed by an underdog enemy they never took seriously until it was far too late. The Gold Civil War was a 10-year-long act of self-immolation, fanned into a blaze by the actions of Stargate Command. They were so obsessed with grabbing a bigger piece of the pie that they didn't notice the whole thing was on fire until they were all cooked. And that's the tactical genius, or perhaps the beautiful irony, of the Gold's demise. They were defeated not by a superior fleet, but by their own greed, arrogance, and the simple, powerful truth that they were never gods at all. It's a classic story of an empire rotting from within, a process started by a single act of defiance and relentlessly exploited by a small group of heroes who dared to challenge the gods. Thanks for watching this deep dive into one of sci-fi's greatest galactic conflicts. What are your favorite moments from the Gold Civil War? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this tactical analysis, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content. See you next time.